Good morning, family and friends. It is great to see everyone here today. We have the great and glorious opportunity today to celebrate a life so well lived. And it's such an honor to be a small part of celebrating Mr. Ray Fulford with all of you today. Christy and I, as we were talking about preparing for today and it being a great celebration, we're going to laugh a lot. We may cry a little bit today. But we're going to share some great stories of a great man who lived a wonderful life. So it's just an honor and privilege to be a part of this celebration. As I began, I received a good many pages of stories. But another thing I received, as Christy and I were talking, and she had talked with a lot of the family members, is one-word descriptions for Uncle Ray or Pop or Dad. And I want to go through and name these descriptions that the family has given him. And as you think about your friend and our family member, Mr. Ray, Uncle Ray, and Pop, I want you to see if these words resonate with you as much as they did with me. So these are grandkids, nieces, nephews, great nieces and nephews that have good words to describe Mr. Ray. Hero, Titan, kind-hearted, strong, kind, generous, loving, gracious, funny, hospitable, storyteller, gentleman, and I mean gentle-man, steadfast, thoughtful, persevering, pioneering, zealous, proficient, gregarious, ambitious, benevolent, progressive, resilient, sincere, competitor. I expected a little more laughter out of that one. Competitor. Firm, just, dancer, caring, patriarch, father figure, role model, mentor, humorous, same, industrious, imaginative, and problem solver. I think we could probably go on and on with a lot of neat, really good descriptives, but I think the family did an awesome job of picking the one word that describes best Uncle Ray and Pop. Ray's and Linda just celebrated this past October 54 years of marriage. I think that right there says a lot in and of itself, of the love and what they experienced together as a couple and as a family. Ray's older brother, Denzel, died when he was only 16 years old, but he and his two younger brothers, Don and Harold, all three became successful business owners in their own respect. And I understand they were quite a feisty group when they were together as a band of brothers. Ray and Linda have two daughters, Christy and Andrea, two sons-in-law, Ben and Josh, 6 grandchildren, many beloved cousins, nieces, nephews. And through all the stories, what I thought was so cool about the family was he treated every single niece, nephew, in-law, outlaw as if they were his own. They've been members here at First Baptist Church for more than 30 years, where Ray has served as a deacon and a Sunday school teacher for young couples. There's something about Ray, as I've read all these stories, that he loved to see large families, and he wanted all the couples that he knew to have many babies. Something you may all not know about Ray is his love for classical books. He has a subscription to a book club, and I understand from talking to Linda, he has over 100 classical hardback books. Y'all, I'm talking about the hardback books that you touch, you feel, you smell, you turn the pages. A lot of us don't do that anymore with all of our electronic devices. But he really enjoyed reading. He was a reader, he was a scholar, and loved to find out facts and read information. Linda shared with me a quote that I think is very appropriate for today as we celebrate Mr. Ray's life. It goes like this: "When the elderly die, a library is lost, and volumes of wisdom and knowledge are gone." There's so much knowledge and so much wisdom that I think we can all relate when we think about Mr. Ray and what he gave to this community, what he gave to each of one of us as individuals. And we're going to miss that. We're going to miss his knowledge and all of that wisdom. As a believer, when you're on your deathbed, you are at the door that leads to paradise. Jesus Christ has his hand on this doorknob, and he's on the other side. But here's what we need to remember and find hope in. Death for a Christian is only the death of our troubles. Death for a believer is only the death of our pain and our troubles. When that door is opened, all of your troubles go away, and you enter a paradise to be with Christ as a spirit made perfect. The family picked Hebrews 12, starting at verse 22, and I want to read this to you. As you think about what Ray must have seen and experienced. You have come to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to countless thousands of angels in a joyful gathering. You have come to the assembly of God's firstborn children, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God himself, who is the judge over all things. You have come to the spirits of the righteous ones in heaven, and have now been made perfect. Mr. Ray has been made perfect. When that door opens, you will be healthy again forever. When that door opens, you will be young again forever. And when that door opens, your best life begins, and it will never stop getting better for all eternity. You're going to hear from several people today, and we're going to celebrate a wonderful life lived and so many great experiences. And as we go through the stories and share today, as much as Ray, his organization, the company, and all that he built has made a lasting mark in our community and throughout the Southeast, I hope you will also listen to the relationships and the impact that that has made on so many people throughout our community and throughout the Southeast as well. So we'll have our first speaker, David. I'm sorry, we've got the poem first, my bad. Come on,
guys. I'm reading a poem called The Sky that Pop wrote. It goes, Pop, how high is the sky? Is it way up there? Did anyone ever touch it? Way up there? Does the moon and the stars live there? Pop, is that where the rain comes from? Is that where my balloon went when it got away? You know, Pop, I bet the sky is a mile away. Pop, is the sky all over the world, even in China too? Pop, if I could fly, could I go to the sky? When I'm big like you, I might just reach up and touch it. I might, Pop, I might. Pop, did you know at night stars light up the sky so that God can see? Did you know he painted the rainbow against the sky? He lives there, you know. Pop, I just wondered if you knew about the sky.
I'm going to be reading a poem called Hold My Hand. Will you walk with me and hold my hand to make me steady even in loose sand? Life has been hard and I'm very tired. I have tried and given my best. Please help me hold my hand. Does it matter to anyone? Does anyone really care that I thirst for approval from those who are my peer? Oh well, what does it matter? If some around me continue their unkind chatter, time will correct them, they will see. When my hair's gray and my strength fades like footprints in the sand, just hold my hand. Thank you.
This community is a great place to live, in large part because in 1965, we got very lucky. Ray graduated from Southern Tech and elected to take a job with Roy Richards Sr. in R&A here in Carrollton. What a blessing that turned out to be for us over these years. He brought to Carrollton his talent, his intellect, his vision, his determination, and he brought all that with him and passed it along over the years. When he got here, I know some of you have heard this, but he got a room at the old Carrollton Hotel over on Maple Street. He paid the handsome sum of $5 a night for a room. He could have gotten one with a bath for $6, but he lived a frugal life, and that quality followed him along as well. But after about a week of being here, he was running low on money. How are we going to solve that? So he made a trip to Atlanta to see Miss Linda. And so he could continue to work. He borrowed $100 so he could continue to work. And Ray jokingly claimed that after 54 years of marriage, he was never able to repay that debt. About a year later, to use a football metaphor, Linda, to use the metaphor, he outpunted his coverage. That's when Linda agreed and they married. I think maybe he would admit that he outpunted his coverage. But over the years, they jokingly debated that who was more responsible for all this success. And Linda's side of it was, he wouldn't even have been here if she hadn't loaned him that $100. So that is the story of how the Fulford family legacy started in Carrollton. And I know there was a lot more earlier, but that's how it started here. This was the merger, if you want to call it that, in marriage that led to the unimaginable success that has transpired in the years since. But maybe not unimaginable to those of us who have watched the Fulford family success, but how Ray Lynn and Linco, as well as many other projects, grew under the guidance of Ray, but with Linda always at his side. In the early years, literally at his side. I went out one afternoon to visit with him when they were building a trailer park. Well, not real close, but they were close. Ray was on the backhoe digging the ditch, and Linda was putting the pipes in the ditch and joining them. If that's not a partnership, if that's not being next to each other, I don't know what is. But in the next, to say over the next few years, that they transformed Carrollton to much of what it is today. But that's not what I want to talk about. Others will, and you all know it, and those things that the grandkids said were just great. I mean, every one of them was on point. And so the rest of us have got a challenge to do anything more meaningful than what they've already done. But what I want to talk about is when Andrea called last Monday to let me know her dad had passed away, I expressed my condolences. And I said, you know, your dad has left many legacies, thriving businesses, buildings, philanthropy, the University of West Georgia Stadium. And if you don't think that was a tough one, I mean, he got over more obstacles and he had to go around corners and everything. It's unbelievable. As a lawyer, I know what obstacles those were, but Ray never said quit, and he didn't. And you go out there and look at it, it's beautiful. I don't think anybody in any other university has anything like that of West Georgia's size. But anyway, he did a lot of things besides the buildings and his business and things like that. And he did those things quietly, and we will never know about a lot of them because he did them without recognition, and he never sought recognition. But he helped people as well as helped businesses. He was just a wonderful human being that believed in helping others was paying back the benefits and things that he had. So as we talked, I said, you know, those things were great legacies. But Andrea, his best legacy, and I think he would tell you this, is his family. Ray was kind of a private person, and like I said, he never sought any big accolades or anything like that for the good things he did. But the family situation I have never known in my life, and I don't believe anybody else can match it. The full extent of the relationship and commitment that I have never known in an individual more dedicated and engaged with his family than Ray Fulford. In the early days when Ray was with his personal friends in a more casual setting, he would speak of his pride in Christy and Andrea, the accomplishments, and there were many. It was not in any bragging way, but his admiration of his love and of the qualities and determination that led them to many achievements. The one I remember the most is the Bluefins. Y'all had a lot of road trips with that and a lot of travel. But he was very proud of that and many other things, but I mention those because they just resonate with me. All of the great qualities in their daughters, which have stayed with them in adulthood, were instilled in them through the teaching example of he and their mother exhibited as a part of a life well lived on many levels, including first and foremost his unwavering devotion and love of his family, but also his work ethic, his intellect, his relationship with friends, and his church. Later, those same qualities were handed down to his grandchildren by the grandchildren's parents and by Ray and Linda. Anna, Will, Jack, Meg, Garrett, and Field and Jay Chapman. Ray loved and adored his time with his grandkids, I think, more than anything. He told me about things, and it was special to him. They enjoyed and appreciated their time with Pop. I know you did. I can recall specific things about things he enjoyed doing with them. And being a farmer, it always impressed me. Ray liked to ride on his tractor or use his tractor. And he'd get a grandchild out there with him, so we could ride all day. So those things he enjoyed talking about, as well as hunting, fishing, sports, football, farm, so forth. The topic of his the topic of the grandchildren always brought that infectious smile that Ray had, and also the excitement in his voice when he was talking about how much pleasure he enjoyed with them. The Fulford legacy was not confined. Ray kept his close relationship with his sister-in-law, Betty, and especially his brothers, Harold and Don. He had lunch with one of them almost every week, and I'd see him out at J&J, where we had these fine dining facilities here in Carrollton. So Ray also kept a close relationship, as you nieces and nephews know. But when those nieces and nephews were there with the grandchildren, and when they were together, it was common to see nieces and nephews at the spread. And I understand one of them even stayed overnight. And on Christmas Eve, that's a deal to work yourself way into that. But the family, Ray and Linda, said it was a great pleasure to see them come down on Christmas morning. Christy and Andrea followed the example of their parents, chose wisely their life partners, Ben and Josh, who have joined in the vision Ray had back in '65. He involved all of his family in his vision and efforts. And how many times do you see the patriarch, whoever gave that word, how many times do you see the patriarch of a family leave his affairs in the very capable hands of his wife, daughters, son-in-law, and family? Ray did that and left a legacy of family first, but also principles, methods, faith, and purpose that his family had adopted and will continue. He was so proud of each and every one of you. I close with just this. back in the early 60s. I came back to Carrollton in 63, and Ray came in 65. So we got to spend a good bit of time together back in those days. One of the things we did, we flew down to Plains, Georgia, a couple of times to get a gentleman to come here and speak. That man later became president of the United States. Now, both Ray's and my politics may have changed some over that period of time, but at the time we were trying to help out a peanut farmer who wanted to be governor, and we wanted to know what he thought. So we did that. One time Ray claimed I got lost, and I claimed that Jimmy Carter was in the wrong place. But he was running for, Ray lived his life, during those trips, Ray and Carter would talk, and I could hear them talking, but I was trying to fly the airplane and find my way back to Carrollton. And Ray lived his life doing his best and expecting the best of everyone around him. And a tough taskmaster, but always fair. President Carter later wrote a book entitled, "Why Not the Best?" When I saw that, I wondered if Ray had given him the inspiration to do it, because that was Ray. Why not the best? Nobody could have said, and helping others, that was the other thing. Ray helped other people when they needed, but he never said anything about it. And like I said, he never sought any accolades or anything for it. He did it out of his heart. No one could have said it better than the statement Ben gave in the local paper. When I saw it, I said, they don't need me to talk. The statement was, while we mourn the loss of our founder, we will continue to be our very best at everything we do. Couldn't have said it better, Ben. I'm sure he was speaking for Ray Lynn and Lenco, but because Ray's influence in teaching by example, it applies to all the members of his family. We know they are and will follow that legacy. And by doing their very best in all they do, this community the blessings of Ray Fulford will continue for years to come. The community is blessed with that legacy Ray left, and his family represents his influence, and that all of those principles will continue because of that. Thank you.
Ray Fulford, my best friend, left us physically on February 14th. But he still lives with me through all the great memories of the times I have had with Ray. I want to share a few of my many experiences with Ray. I initially met Ray when he built my first medical office building on Clinic Avenue. He was there digging footings, and it was in the spring of 1978. The next building I did with Ray was a design build on Professional Park, a medical office building. We spent many hours doing that design, a lot of times going late in the evenings, and then we'd end up at the Waffle House for a while. After the Professional Park, we ended up designing and building Patient Services building, the Villa Med building in Villa Rica, and then finally the medical office building that we currently occupy on Clinic Avenue. We became good friends from these projects, and this expanded to other areas, such as golf, travel, social activities. Ray had a condo in Lake Martin, and in Alabama, and he moved to a different one. We bought the first one, and we spent a lot of time there, boating, playing golf, messing around, just etc. We had our first father-son golf outing at Lake Martin with 4 father-sons. Ray and Ben, sort of his son, Trey and myself, Tommy Green and T, and David and Tony Scruggs. This led to an annual father-son tournament Many years later, we still have an annual father-son tournament, which has grown to approximately 40 participants. Ray would usually win his matches on the individual matches, and when he was paired with me, we would usually win. Not only in that father-son tournament, but when we played golf. And we became known as R squared, so you could not beat R square. Ray went to Cabo, San Lucas, and he bought some property there. And then he took Susan and I there, and we ended up buying property there. We then had many trips to Cabo, fishing, playing golf, partying, exploring the area, and just loafing. We finished the Bisbee Marlin tournament in Cabo. We fished in it, and we did finish also. And that was a 3-day tournament, and it's the largest marlin tournament in the world. They had like a couple $1 million in prizes. We did not win, but we had fun. We did catch a marlin, but it wasn't a qualifier. We played golf in Scotland. We played many other places in the U.S. We traveled with Ray and Linda to many destinations such as Gulf Coast, Turks and Caicos, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, St. Martin, Italy, and numerous times to Cabo. As you can see, we were very close to Linda and Ray. I want to share a couple of funny episodes with you. Once on a trip to the Gulf Coast, Ray decided to stop at the dog track outside Montgomery. We were going to the nice area upstairs where you can eat and all that stuff. Susan and Linda had their designer Bermuda shorts on, and they wouldn't let them in. They had to go back to the van and change into some long pants. Ray and I loved that, and we ribbed the girls about it for the rest of the evening. Another time with Ray, Trey, and I, we were playing golf in St. Simons. There was the 3 of us. The young boy joined us as a 4th, and he rode with my son, Trey. He said to Trey, "It must be nice to play golf with your dad and grandfather." Since then, Ray became Trey's grandfather. We always kidded Ray about that. Ray and I had very similar backgrounds. He a farm boy from Wrightsville, Georgia, and I a farm boy from Salina, Ohio. We both worked very hard as youngsters and throughout our lives, which had led us to our success. Ray was and is my best friend, and I have numerous memories that will always be with me. Ray was bigger than life, a great person, great friend whom I will miss. But I will always have the memories. Until we meet again, Ray, God bless you. Rest in peace.
Have to bear with me. Old age is the devil with your arthritis and arthritic knees, but that's where we are. First, I want to tell the family how much I appreciate this opportunity to relate a very few of the many experiences Ray and others, the others being mainly the bus buddies, have shared. I could talk about his many wonderful legacies, but you can read that obituary for those remarks. By the way, somebody did a great job with that obituary. No, my remarks are especially for the grandchildren. Not to exclude the children. He was very proud of who they are and as adults and what they have become and are becoming, with all they have learned from him. No, my message is primarily for Will, Jack, Meg, Anna, Bryce, Jay, Field, and all the many other kin who are still becoming adults and finding your place in the world. I want you to remember the Ray that I loved, the Ray before that magnificent brain was trapped in a failing body. I want you to celebrate and emulate his tremendous personality, his ability to meet anyone, regardless of race, creed, or education. And because of his business knowledge or his retention of the many, many books we've referred to already that he had read. By doing so, he was immediately able to converse with them on any subject. We also shared in the pride of our grandkids' accomplishments, whether it was sports, academics, or career achievements. And we both could brag because it was the truth. But what I really want to share is how we had, and this is in quotes, adult fun. And there are many tales to tell. I'm not going to tell all of them, Linda. Mainly because of time limitations, I have chosen only one. And that one is entitled The Creek. As you know, our special travel group, the Bus Buddies, a lot of our peers might have considered that we were almost all over the hill. But in reality, for more than a dozen years, we were far from it. The group consisted of the Stones, the Denneys, and the Fulfords. 6 folks who had bonded during the planning and construction of the University of West Georgia Stadium Complex. I mean, we've been friends before, but that bonded us. And even before its completion, we started following the team, probably the oldest tailgaters there ever were, to some strange and faraway venues, such as the searing heat of an early fall day in southern Mississippi. I don't even remember the name of the school, but they didn't have anywhere to park our buses, I can tell you that. And the swamps of Louisiana. It's amazing who we played back in those days. This resulted one evening as we gathered at the Fulford Lake cabin, which we often did to play around at 313. Linda dubbed our group with the Bus Buddy name. You remember that? Of course, Roy took over and designed stick-on decals with names and logo, so nobody could confuse us with any of the other tailgaters. The tailgating soon turned into more extensive travels from Key West in the south to the Grand Canyon in the west, and many points in between. Several of our favorites were destinations in Appalachia. One was near Pigeon Forge, North Carolina, an RV park situated along a creek. Roy, who was our planner, always seemed to prefer those spots on the creek. Normally, we arrived together and helped each other get our buses into the designated spot. Believe me, a 45-foot vehicle is not so easy to back into a narrow lot that drops off into a creek. But that's what Roy loved. For some reason, I was delayed, and we arrived about 30 minutes after the two of them had already parked. No problem. Normally, as soon as a late arrival came in, the other two would appear immediately and assist with the parking. I pulled up to my designated spot. No buddies. No one appeared. So Tish and I managed to get situated without the customary help. When done, I set out to see if my buddies had some sort of trouble that had detained them, expecting the worst. Well, you would not believe the sight we beheld. Bear in mind that these are two very successful, prominent community leaders, one a church deacon. They were sitting on their folding camp chairs in the middle of the creek, which was about calf deep, with their breeches rolled up and enjoying their afternoon beverage delight while cooling their heels in the mountain stream. Quite a sight. Worse, the deacon was enjoying a conversation with a total stranger on the opposite bank. I told you he had that ability. And offering to share with him a glass of, as Ray put it at the time, sweet Southern tea. We all know after a long day's drive, the beverage was not tea. Thank goodness the fellow declined, identified himself as a Southern Baptist preacher, and moved on down the creek. The rest of us by then were just stifling with laughter at the sight. So much for getting help that day. This is the way you need to remember your granddad. Sure, he was a community icon. Sure, he was a devoted husband and family man. You've heard all of that. Who enjoyed watching his kids and grandkids as they grew and are growing into adults with a purpose, modeled after his teachings. But he also enjoyed life, and I loved him for it. I could tell a lot more stories, but my time is limited. I was told 5 minutes, I'm probably over. But if you want to ask or hear more, just ask Linda about a tremendous spa experience in a New Mexico mud bath, or acting like love-struck teenagers, and they did, rolling in the clover at Cecil Bay RV Park in Marina. She'll have to explain that. Cecil Bay is located off of I-75 between Adel and Hayhira as you head toward Valdosta. And even though the park we named the Marina, there's not a creek, there's not a lake, there's not a river in sight. But let me tell you, Ray, like all of us, loved these trips. And I know that Ray and my daughter Sydney are in heaven now picking out the best RV spot they could find on a creek, Roy. You can believe that. Thank you.
What a beautiful day to celebrate and honor the life of my great friend, Mr. Ray Fulford. If you ask everybody in this room what's probably the most famous person to come out of Wrightsville, Georgia, the first thing that would come to mind for a lot of you, Herschel Walker. But I say, oh no. For me, in this Carrollton community, I contend it was a Fulford brothers gang. And I don't think anybody that's got to know these brothers and these families would disagree with that. But I can imagine there's several people they left behind in Wrightsville that are glad they got the heck out of town. No one will never know how many lives Ray had a positive impact on in this community. Honesty, integrity, a humble man of character. If Ray Fulford told you something, you could take it to the bank. Next to my dad and my father-in-law, Ray had more influence on my life than any other man. He was my friend, he was my mentor, as he was to so many. And he wanted to see all those around him be successful. In addition to our friendship, we developed a great business relationship when I was first getting started at West Georgia Electric. Ray was renovating a lot of the old downtown area. He would walk through the job with me. He'd say, simply take care of the electrical. He didn't ask me for a price. He just said, get the job done. You don't know how much the trust he put in me meant to me. It was so special. And you can bet when it came time for me to build an office or a new shop building, I didn't solicit any prices. I just said, Ray, here's what we need. He took care of it. We had a trusting relationship that you very rarely see in the business world today. And Ray was a master. He loved the challenge, and he was a master when it came to the value engineering design build philosophy. He could dress down an architect, couldn't he, Alex, in a heartbeat if he had a better idea. And you, Roy too, you've been there. Usually his idea was final. He would bring his trusted team of subcontractors together, and through his leadership, we would work really hard on providing the owner with a quality project at the most economical cost feasible, never sacrificing quality craftsmanship. In the early days, Ray and I would take a break sometimes and go down and have lunch at the old Polar Cub. We'd talk about business for a few minutes, then on to family, golf, and football. My son Jared was having lunch with us one day. Ray told me, he says, you know, you need to let that boy work for me for a couple of years after he gets out of college. Get an idea of the overall construction industry before he settles in at West Georgia Electric. And that sounded like a good idea at the time. And I probably would have. But I was afraid I couldn't get him back. Ray was a fierce competitor on the golf course, as Ralph has talked about. He was a grinder, and I mean a serious grinder. And we were partners several times on Ralph's trip down to Stillwaters when the older ones would play the sons on the first day. And when I was partnering with Ray, it was always a relaxing round for me. All I had to do was cheer him on, keep score, hold the umbrella if it's raining, and just make sure his club was clean. And I don't think we ever lost. Besides being an astute businessman, Ray had a fun side. We had many great times celebrating in the back of the old Drury Mansion after winning bids in the early days. And one day I will always remember Annette and I traveling with Ray and Linda in their motorhome on a beautiful fall afternoon in 1982 to Auburn, Alabama for the Herschel and Bo Walker show. And afterwards we celebrated Georgia winning. And that was the day that Larry Munson made his famous "Sugar's Falling from the Sky" radio call. That was just a few years that Ray was a dog fan. His true loyalty was, of course, to his beloved Georgia Tech. What a shame. He sure would have made a great dog. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he and Tommy Greer got their foursome together this afternoon, and they're about ready to tee off on a beautiful course that our precious Lord has blessed them with. And I'm sure they're all dressed up in their Georgia Tech paraphernalia. Ray was always a strong man during his bout with his affliction. We'd see him at lunch on occasions over those last few months that he could get out. His face would just light up when we'd sit down and talk a few minutes. And he was the type of person that could just brighten your day with his gentle smile. Andrea, Christy, the greatest blessing that a child can have is to have loving parents who provide them with a Christian home. You were blessed with the best. For Josh, you and Ben, I'd just say you guys are lucky to land these girls. But he was so proud of all of you, and he loved you so much. Oh, hey, loved those grandchildren also. I bet he never missed a swim event or a ball game. If there's any way he could make it to, that his grandkids were participating in. You could see a special glimmer in his eye when he would talk about you. He loved you and he was so proud of all of you. And Linda, words cannot describe how much Ray loved his Linda. He's told me on numerous occasions how much you helped him when he was at Southern Tech and he was getting Ray Lynn started. Now, he never told me how many of those papers you did for him, how many tests you might have taken for him, but I know he was truly appreciative. And Ray would want you to be strong, enjoy your life, and I pray his loving memory will comfort you forever. In closing, I want to thank God for bringing this Fulford gang to Carrollton. What a blessing for our community. We will all miss Ray, and I will always cherish our friendship. May God bless his family.
I want to thank the family for giving me the opportunity to come and honor Ray Fulford, my friend. In the mid-1990s, when I arrived to town, I spent a good bit of time getting to understand the chamber and the business community. And early in that process, two names kept coming up again and again: Ray Lynn and Ray Fulford. I vividly remember my first meeting with Ray Fulford almost 30 years ago now. He was certainly a Southern gentleman and very gracious, but I was a young whippersnapper, and he made it was evident early in that meeting that you needed to have your facts right and know your numbers when you're meeting with Ray Fulford. I never forgot that. Ray's impact on the business community was evident in those early years. Ray Lynn was becoming a powerhouse construction business, and there were numerous developments throughout West Georgia that had Ray's fingerprints on them. In the late 1990s, a group of citizens came together, made up of people like Roy Richards, John Burson, Tommy Green, Bob Stone, Tom Upchurch, and of course Ray Fulford, to create an economic development and quality of life initiative. So imagine getting all of those gentlemen in one room together. They all thought they had the best idea. But out of that exchange came Carroll Tomorrow, which was centered on the idea that a stronger economy allowed the community to leap forward in education, workforce development, and other quality of life aspects. At the heart of the Carroll Tomorrow mission was a stronger economy. The clear choice, no one came close second, to chair that area was Ray Fulford. Through his work with Carroll Tomorrow, Ray has been instrumental in recruiting industries and business to the West Georgia region, including the recruitment of Walmart.com to Carroll County, the first online Walmart fulfillment center in the United States at the time. His engineering, construction, developer mindset made him a perfect individual to put the West Georgia region on the map from an economic development perspective. In addition to his role at Carroll Tomorrow, he served on the Chamber Board of Directors and received numerous awards for his efforts in the area of economic development. So what made Ray Fulford so successful in these efforts? Certainly it's been mentioned his tenacity. He had a lot of that. his ability to focus on the objectives at hand. In his well-known reputation, which has been referenced, he was never going to quit. Those are the kind of characteristics needed to succeed in the highly competitive world of economic development, bringing those best companies and jobs to our community. Ray's successes and contributions are everywhere. Whether it's retail centers, the University of West Georgia football stadium, Carrollton High School, numerous major medical buildings, some of the most significant expansions Tanner Health System has done, he was involved in all of them. He's also had a significant impact on housing, apartment projects, and he remade the hotel industry in this region. The interesting thing about Ray, he was not just about economic development. He also championed important aspects for a high quality of life. His efforts included focus on the arts, the Carrollton Cultural Arts Center, recreational facilities like Eats Carrollton Gymnasium. So it's interesting when you step back and you look at Ray Fulford's impact. He's one of the few people in the last 50 years that has made a significant contribution to the big three institutions that are the backbone of the West Georgia economy. I was hard-pressed to find anyone else that had that degree of impact, whether it was an early involvement in the building of the manufacturing facilities of Southwire, his significant contribution to the medical community, including Tanner Health System, or his passion for the University of West Georgia. He positively impacted them all. Even while sick, he did not quit. Ray was thinking about the future, and remarkably, after being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and ALS, Ray set out to create a state-of-the-art neurology center at Tanner that would provide treatment for patients suffering from ALS and Alzheimer's. His vision in this area will result in the ability to recruit and retain the very best clinicians in the neurology field and will help patients for generations. Really remarkable. Clearly, Ray had vision in everything he did. Whether it was starting a successful business or giving back to the community, he was always thinking. He was a true idea man. And as you apply the standard of a great community leader, as one through their efforts made the community significantly better than they found it, then I would say, Ray Fulford, mission accomplished.
Good morning. I would also like to thank the Fulford family for asking me to say a few words about the long bond between the Fulford and the Roush families. But you need to be a little careful what you're asking for when you put an Episcopalian behind a Baptist pulpit. This last week has certainly been a time of reflection and memories and dusting off some very old video tapes, very old. But in the early 70s, Chester Roush presented Ray Fulford, persuaded Ray Fulford to work with him to build a few little cottages on the shores of Lake Lanier Islands. As Ray told it, Chester called him and asked him what he was doing. Ray replied that he had opened his own business. Chester said, "I know that. I mean, what are you doing?" And Ray replied, "Well, I'm just trying to make a living." The subsequent war that developed between them and the Army Corps of Engineers was the seed to a friendship that lasted 25 years between two guys who were 20 years apart in age. And imagine the Army Corps began to have second thoughts about watershed management after dealing with Ray and Chester. Their strong friendship was bolstered by a deep admiration and respect that they had for one another. And as we know, their business partnership over the years were prolific and very successful. Linda, I know it's hard to believe, but it's been, Matthew Rouse tells me it's been almost 20 years since Chester's 80th birthday party where you and Ray were there. As you all may have noticed, Ray often liked to be the last one to speak at something, to say the last word, so to speak. And sure enough, his toast to Dad that evening was the last one that occurred, and he had no prepared text, but of course he knocked it out of the park. He spoke of the values he saw in Dad that he himself held very high in his own life, and that he had tried to emulate in his own family and business and lifestyle. Goodness, kindness, unselfishness, leadership, mentorship, and a guiding light, a heartfelt devotion to God, and an unending dedication to being a good husband and father, and especially owing everything to your wife as a benchmark of your life and marriage. The two guys loved life and lived it on their own terms, but they also had a shared dedication to serve others more than just themselves, which in turn, of course, has made this entire community a better place. Along those lines, I reached back and would like to share a few lines from Reverend Hazel Glover's eulogy that she gave at Chester's service. I feel like her remarks hit the nail on the head regarding Ray. He spent his life leading, teaching, calling people forward, striving to make a difference in his community, his family, his church, and his nation. He had a plan. He was in charge. He did his homework. He made things happen. He took care of things. He stood for what he believed, and he encouraged the rest of us to do the same. I would say that Ray not just encouraged, but challenged all of us with his generosity, optimism, ever-present optimism, and concern for other people, which lifted the lives of many, many. A good friend who owns a successful business lost her father recently, and in a note to me, she wrote, "All that I have been able to accomplish is because of my dad." I dare say that that's not too far from the truth regarding Ray's influence on many lives in this room, including my own. Since the day in 1984 when we opened the doors to our business, Ray's influence, Ray and Ray Lynn have had our back and been extremely supportive. Beginning with Linda and Ray's home, the projects included the Cultural and Arts Center, Sunset Hills Country Club, Greenway, Southwire, bank branches, apartment projects, and a host of office, industrial, and commercial buildings. Just a couple of stories. One evening, many of you were there the night there was a heated public hearing regarding the Cultural Arts Center. I cannot remember what everybody was heated about at the time, but there was opposition, and once again, Ray elected to speak last. And he stood up and he said, "My name's Ray Fulford, and I'm the villain here." But he proceeded to turn that whole thing around. And by the time he'd finished speaking, the community was raring to go with the Cultural Arts Center. Another time, only time Ray and I broke ranks, and you see my tech tie on, was when Herschel was at Georgia. And of course, Ray was pulling for the dogs, as he should, from Wrightsville. And otherwise, we had a mutual respect for tech. we have many productive meetings. One in particular was a golf game at Ansley Golf Club. It was brand new. They just rebuilt their club just like Sunset Hills was about to. And we played, and at the end, a gentleman told us, by no means spend $200, $300 a square foot on golf carts in the basement of your building, which changed that whole project. And the rest is history on that one. And speaking of what Dennis was saying earlier, I mean, we were well into CDs. Kurt, you remember this, on Adaptive Learning Center project, never got built, but Ray walked in and saw our design, and he said, "Are you all crazy? You'll never be able to build that." And he was exactly right. It never got built. Jan Roush said to me recently, "I would have sworn a little more than a year ago that we were done with plagues, civil wars, and based on last week in Texas, the Ice Age. But today, I'd go under oath and swear that the following is still very true, as witnessed by the life of Ray. One is not rich from your possessions, but from the lives that you enrich with your wisdom and love." At the opening of the Cultural Arts Center that I pulled up in one of the videos from many years ago, Ray spoke the following words that he said that he believed in with all his heart. "If one does the right thing for the right reasons, good things will happen." This early spring day of Lent, let's shed some of our old gray ways of winter and strap on some new right things for the right reasons and see in Ray's honor if we make this world just a little better place. The future is what we make it, and Ray certainly has our back. God bless. Thank you.
Wow. Where does one begin? I'd like to thank the family for the honor and the privilege that you've given to me to reflect upon this great gentleman, Mr. Ray Fulford. Miss Linda, Christy and Ben, Andrea and Josh, I'm humbled and I'm appreciative to share a moment about a gentleman that you dearly love, and I do too. I hear that first impressions are very important, and they're oftentimes the best, most pure summation of the qualities of a person. Interestingly enough, I've got to tell you that my first impression of Mr. Ray was through the glowing words of my father as he spoke of Ray Fulford in respectful, in honorable, and in admirable terms. My dad always encouraged me to learn from the best if possible, and Ray Fulford was indeed one of the best in the words of my father. And that was my first impression of Mr. Ray. Now, you see, I was raised here in this southern community and taught that the term Mr. was a term of endearment and respect. And no matter how many times Ray Fulford asked me to call him, just call me Ray, he was always Mr. Ray to me due to my love, my respect, and my appreciation for this tremendous gentleman. A gentleman whose integrity and professionalism certainly preceded him in life. Now, Mr. Ray and Miss Linda are a picture-perfect example of a self-made couple. Now, I remember the story that David was sharing about the stay at the Carrollton Hotel and selecting the room for $5 rather than $6 there. I also recall a story of Mr. Ray and Miss Linda collecting scrap lumber to manufacture wood pallets with their own 4 hands. Their hard work and their ingenuity led them to an ultra-successful business career, which then fed their generosity to the people and organizations of this community that we call our home. Many persons, many groups, many churches and missions have benefited through the years from their generous hearts. I'll never forget a stroll that I took with my wife Sarah in 2007 in a hayfield alongside Lovern Road on the backside of the campus of the University of West Georgia. I remember sharing with Sarah that I hoped we would live to see the construction of a football stadium for the university on that site, a site that was designated for such a project sometime earlier. As a member of the administrative team of West Georgia Athletics, this was a dream that I longed to see fulfilled. And through the tireless efforts of men like Ray Fulford, Bob Stone, Jim Gill, and numerous others that I failed to mention today, this stadium became a reality. These men simply would not stop until they saw us kick off in University Stadium on September the 7th, 2009. Now, this game, played before a capacity crowd on a steamy late summer evening, signaled the beginning of a new chapter for our university and our community, one that will always be viewed as one of the major achievements and additions for our region of the state. And to see the glow on Ray Fulford's face on that fantastic day was something to behold. For his dream and his efforts to fulfill his dream had become reality as that flyover took place during the national anthem, signaling the beginning of a new era for the University of West Georgia. And Ray Fulford was a vital and essential cog in making that happen. Not only had his company, Ray Lynn and Associates, constructed the stadium, but his and Linda's generosity made the construction a consideration and ultimately a possibility. Their generosity was rewarded with the naming of our playing surface in University Stadium as Ray Lynn Field. For several years following that opening kickoff, Mr. Ray would consistently call me, Ben, to make sure that all was well with the facility. He, Ben, and their team have always stood behind their product to the highest degree. And we now enjoy one of the finest athletic facilities in all of Division II in the NCAA throughout this entire country. University Stadium has proved to be the catalyst for our athletic success on the playing field, Ray Lynn Field, as the Wolves have now advanced to the NCAA playoffs 4 of the past 6 years of competition. West Georgia has now developed a reputation for success on the gridiron, and Ray Fulford was a major player in the development of this success. He even had a grandson, Will, to be a member of those 2 Final Four teams. More importantly, many young West Georgia athletes have now sunk their cleats into the turf of Ray Lynn Field and gained much more than athletic achievement. The academic development, the devotion to teammates, the dedication to conquering the challenge at hand, and finishing the task in a successful manner are all qualities that the young Wolves student athletes can now attain in a place that they can now call home. A home made possible as a result of the dedication and the generosity shown them in recent years by Mr. Ray Fulford. And as much as Mr. Ray seemed to enjoy our success on the athletic field, I'm most certain that he found more delight in seeing the development of these young people that will step into leadership roles as a result. And I look around this room and I see many of you. And this will last for many years to come. Now, I've got to admit that one of my personal great sources of enjoyment and happiness was to see Mr. Ray after an impressive win over an arch rival, a big conference win, a big regional victory, and certainly the big wins on our marches through the NCAA playoffs, twice reaching the NCAA Final Four, as I mentioned, with Will as a part of that team, and attracting huge crowds in University Stadium. That warm smile that Ray Fulford had would always be waiting for me. Whether in the stadium concourse, in the Coliseum, or as I visited their motorhome alongside the Stones, following a long and productive day of football operations, his statement was, "That was pretty good, wasn't it?" Yes, Mr. Ray, that was pretty good. And as I stand here today to reflect on the life of this great man and all he has done for each of you and for me, I have a tremendous admiration, a tremendous respect, and a tremendous appreciation for a life well lived, a life of many great victories, and often for those around him, such as us. A life that has always sought to have a positive impact on his fellow man. Mr. Ray, as you complete the fourth quarter of your time with us here, I must say to you that was more than pretty good, wasn't it? That was amazingly good, Mr. Ray Fulford. You were always a supreme and a gracious winner. And until we can all join your team again soon, we love you and thank you, my friend.
The family has asked that we join together in singing On Jordan's Stormy Banks. These are good words for us, good words for this day, and you'll find them on the back of your program. If you'll take that and join me in standing as we prepare to sing.
That's halftime. Are y'all ready for the second half? I almost forgot I was supposed to get back up and say a few words. I've enjoyed the stories so much. Thank you, gentlemen. So I've been asked to share some of the stories from the family members. So I've gone through and I've had a lot of fun reading these wonderful stories. Most are from the grandkids, the nieces and the nephews, a few cousins, and the kids. So here we go. I first have to talk about Christmas. It's already been alluded to just a little bit, but it's been amazing as I looked at all the different stories. Every single niece, nephew, and grandchild talked about Christmas. There was something about Ray who made Christmas, he and Linda made Christmas a very special and magical event in their household. It makes me think kind of the Stone family just a little bit, because in my early days as a kid, I can remember all my cousins coming and spending the night under one roof, and us staying there, as crazy as that sounds, sleeping on the floor in sleeping bags and wherever we can find a piece of carpet. It was very similar in the Fulford's house. They were adamant and very intentional about having as many of their family members come and join them for Christmas and spend the night with them. Uncle Ray or Pop would make every Christmas a magical event. The kids were always the top priority. There was always a big, beautiful tree, gingerbread houses. He would get the kids, gather them up, go outside and gather up reindeer hay. I don't know where they make reindeer hay, but he would get reindeer hay and reindeer feed for the reindeer to soon be coming that evening. There was something about Ray that he played I'm looking around to see how young the kids are in the room, but I know we're streaming online, but it was something very special about Ray had a connection to Santa Claus, and he would make sure Santa Claus made those calls to the grandkids and to make sure they knew Santa was checking the list and making his list and checking it twice. They watched Christmas movies on the carpet and the bathroom floor until they would fall asleep late at night waiting on Santa. There was tons, this was a really neat remark, there was tons of laughter and love. I love that. Christmas was a very special time and still is in the Fulford house. One of Jack's favorite memories of Pop was being with him when he killed his first deer. And when I first read that, I had to read it a couple of times. I was thinking, Jack's first deer? But no, this was Ray's first deer. Watching him try to calm down and collect his thoughts after he shot it he was like a kid again. He was grabbing Jack, saying, "That's my first deer, Jack. That's my first deer." He couldn't be happier to share that memory with Pop, because that was one of Jack's first deer hunts, and to this day, one of the biggest reasons why he still enjoys to go hunting. Alyssa remembers Uncle Ray letting her ride on the tractor. You heard a little bit of story of this earlier. Riding all around their pasture in their pasture and driving the tractor. And then they would hop into Aunt Linda's VW and take a ride to the Tasty Freeze for ice cream. She remembers being scared to death at Six Flags when she was contemplating whether or not to ride the log ride, but Ray assured her it would be okay. And scared to death, she believed him, and of course it was okay, and they had a blast. Grandson Field, which you already heard earlier, sharing his poem, cherishes all the wonderful times they were able to go fishing together. Ray's sister-in-law, Beverly, she'll think of Ray now all the time whenever she comes up with a new gadget for the kitchen. And I didn't know about this, but Ray had this thing. He had a fetish about new appliances and different gadgets for the kitchen. And so she and Ray would compete and brag against each other on who had the latest and greatest. Ray's brother, Don, he recalls the time that they were late for school one day. Their teacher, Mr. Gordon, said that they could take zeros for the first 3 classes or they could just go home. Well, that was a no-brainer. They went home. They got their fishing poles and spent the day fishing. Well, they got chewed out the next day. Mr. Gordon meant for them to go home and stay, but fishing made a whole lot more sense to the brothers. Here's a sweet and tender memory that Anna shared just a few months ago as she was walking down the aisle on her wedding day, seeing Pop mouth the words, "I love you." What a special and sweet time and memory that is. And then there's meals. The only time that he was able to say a bad word was when they would sing the Georgia Tech fight song and that thing came along where it said, "A hell of an engineer." And that was the only time he could remember being able to say a bad word. Mills and Jack would help plant potatoes in the garden down by the barn. Uncle Ray or Pop would show them how to do everything, you know, Ray, just so, and taught them so many life lessons along the way. He was so patient with them, and he was so proud of all the work and all the things that they accomplished. Mills also shared about John Wayne movie nights. So Ray must have been a huge fan of all the John Wayne movies. So they would go down to the cabin and eat beef stew and watch John Wayne movies. And then Uncle Ray would have a few stories of his own to share. There was one particular time when he and Will insisted on trying to sleep in a sleeping bag in a tent outdoors. And once they got out there, they thought they were going to make the evening. And then the coyotes started yelling in the distance, and they decided, well, we better pack things up and head back inside. I love what Mills shared. Thanks for being the best pop and always treating me as your own. James and I were talking. He remembers a time when Ray asked him, Gene, and another one of the helpers to assist them in painting a fence over at Ray's house. The project was going real slow. Ray decided to turn it into a competition. So they alternated a two-man team working 30 minutes apiece to see who could paint the most distance of fence to see who was going to be the winner. They accepted the challenge, and following Ray's lead, they were also competitive. James said he didn't even realize Ray's cunning ability to make them more productive while saving him some money. Jeff and Peggy remember about 25 years ago at the lake talking with Uncle Ray. I've already told you how much Ray loves kids. He wanted them to be sure and have lots of babies. After 5 years of marriage, they weren't doing very much to fulfill Uncle Ray's dreams. They shared with Ray their concern about having to bring up a child in this crazy world. We can relate to that these days. But Uncle Ray explained to them that every generation has had this same fear. His parents had it. He and Linda had it. But he just said, you love a child and raise them right, and I promise they will be okay. Having a child will be the best part of both of you. And talking to Uncle Ray changed their minds. 9 months later, they've got their first child. They were so glad they had had that conversation with Uncle Ray. Kurt remembers so many different stories, but the one that stands out the most is one involving a possum in the basement. Uncle Ray had asked Kurt to hold a clothes basket and to quickly cover up the possum when he scared it out from its hiding place as Ray was holding a pool cue stick. Kurt said, "No way, are you crazy?" The two of them were laughing really hard, but Ray still convinced him that he could do it. So Kurt was actually able to snag that possum underneath the basket. And as it looked up and snarled at him with his big ugly teeth, together they scooted that basket with the possum in tow over to the open door in the basement. Kurt said Uncle Ray kicked that basket 50 yards out the door. He said, okay, it probably wasn't 50 yards, but in my mind, it went a long way. A couple of weeks ago, Kurt brought that story back up to Uncle Ray, and even though he couldn't speak, he said Ray got his feet just a shuffling thinking about that possum, kicking his feet. The one word that came to Todd as he thought about his memories is this word same, S-A-M-E. This took me a minute, but I think you'll get the gist of this. He hears this word from Ellen all the time as she talks with her friends. Its meaning comes from when two people share the same thought, the same idea, the thought, the feeling or emotion, whether it's a subject or an event or a memory. And so Todd and Ray had many of these, quote, same memories. A couple of weeks ago, Todd walked into his room, and as their eyes met each other, Ray's arm just reached up and reached out to him. They hugged each other. They both shed a few tears, and together they shared the same. They shared so many good times in that one moment without ever saying a single word. They were sharing the same. I want to read just a couple of more, and I'm going to read these as Christy wrote these for me. Two really neat stories. My first state swim meet was in Milledgeville, Georgia, when I was 8 years old. I swam poorly in the preliminaries of the 25-yard freestyle. I was supposed to be seated first for finals due to my fast time, but instead I was seated fourth. I was so down on myself and pouting. Dad came into the camper and asked what was wrong. And so I shared with him how much I had prayed to win, and God let me down. He did not hold up his end of the deal. And then Ray said, Christy, God did live up his end. He gave you the talent. It's up to you to decide what you're going to do with it. Finals were later that day, and I swam my hardest, and I placed first. I swam my heart out. What a life lesson. Second story. Dad could dance. Some of my most favorite memories were him telling me stories about his high school days and all the sock hops and trips to different local towns to go dance. He would grab a random girl and just start the jitterbug. Occasionally, we would convince Dad to put on his favorite 50s music, and we would watch he and Mom shag and jitterbug and do all those dances they loved. He taught Andrea and I several moves as well. I've always loved to dance with Dad. He's so smooth. He knew the moves and knew how to make his lady feel like she was the best dancer and the best partner in the room. I believe Josh shared a great summary of Ray when he said in his notes, Ray lived to make his world better. Ray lived to make his world better, whether it was his business, his community, his family, and everything he touched. He just wanted his world to be as great as it could possibly be. So in closing, let me go back to that poem I read earlier that Linda shared with me. And I guess I would add just one more line to that poem. It says, when the elderly die, a library is lost, and volumes of wisdom and knowledge are gone. And I would add, but these memories, they will be cherished forever. And so, family, we all together hurt for you. We grieve with you. But what a wonderful legacy of a wonderful man who lived a wonderful, full life. And as you've heard through all of the stories, how much his family meant to him. He was able to love and he was able to give of himself because he saw that in the example that the Bible teaches us, the way that God first loved us by giving us his son for all who would choose to believe. And Ray believed that. And that's what gave him his inspiration and his ability to love so well. So if he was here and he had an opportunity to share the mic, he would say, y'all making a big old fuss over nothing. Y'all are a dime waiting on a dollar. But I think he would also say, I've just experienced crossing through that threshold. I've opened the door, and Jesus was on the other side. And if you don't know him as your Lord and Savior, I want you to, because that's why Ray was able to love. So let me encourage you with that today and leave that with you. But just know this, you've got such a large family and a large community who is surrounding you with love and care. And we are here for you, and we love you. And man, what a great legacy that you have as a patriarch. Let's join together in prayer. Father, thanks so much for your unconditional love that goes beyond any boundary that we can ever make here on earth. So God, I pray today that as we celebrate this life of Mr. Ray Fulford, God, that you would embrace us, that you would embrace the family, that you would pour your Spirit out as your word promises us, that blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So we count on you, God, to send your Spirit of comfort as we go through these next days and weeks and months. But let us know and let us be confident and be joyful and grateful that you do not leave us in this world, but you bring us to this new paradise to be with you forever, where our sickness is gone, the pain is gone, and our life gets better every single day with you. So God, we lift this family up and we lift this time up and pray that it's honoring to you, God, and that we are able to love well because you first love us. So help us to go in peace, God. Help us to share this same love with those that are in our sphere of influence. We are so grateful for your love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.